A really key part of your brand and your website looking great is the color palette. That is, what colors are you using for your brand and your website and other marketing materials. So in this video, we're going to talk about what are some different tools and online resources and what's some theory behind picking a really good color palette for your website. So to get started and set the stage for what exactly are we tracking towards here? What is the end goal of trying to establish a color palette? Well, for your website, the color palette is going to consist of a couple different things. And these are going to be applied throughout all of your branding materials for consistent look, feel, and color scheme across everything you're doing with your brand. So first off, we want to pick a really good primary color. So this is a color that you're going to use most throughout your website and marketing materials. For example, Coca-Cola, you probably think of the color red. Walmart uses the color blue a lot. And you can think of other examples down the line. So what you want to think about first is finding what is that really good primary color you're going to use as the anchor point for your branding materials. Along with that, though, you want to have a couple supplemental colors. So this might be one or two or maybe three colors that work really well and pair well with that primary color. On top of that, then, you also want to pick a font color. This might not be common knowledge, but oftentimes using a pure straight black doesn't always look the best for fonts. So instead of picking a pure black, you want to pick a really dark gray or some color that's slightly a smidge lighter than a straight black to use for fonts. It just looks a little bit better to the eyes. It isn't quite as harsh. And then last, if desired, a lot of times on websites you'll see a clean white background, and that's totally fine. But if you want to change things up a little bit, you might want to find a really subtle background color that goes really well also. So it could be a really subtle, lighter shade of your primary color, a natural color like a white or a gray or an off-white as well. Something like that to add a little variety to the background of your website if you'd like. But really, these are the main components we're trying to get towards in picking out our color palette specifically for the website. But again, this can be applied across all your branding materials. So when it comes to actually picking out and deciding on your color palette for your website, what do you actually do? Really, to get started, one of the best tools I refer to in a lot of cases is good old Google. So one good thing to do to just get the gears churning and start getting some help as far as what options could be, honestly, is just to Google website color palette examples. And let's just look and see what we have here, if there's any good inspiration that could help get the gears turning. So the first result is just from Canva. And let's scroll down a little bit and see what they have to offer. So what we can see here is this Canva website, just for starters, has some examples of different color palettes, some examples of how they're used on websites. And just going through an exercise like this can really get you started on what colors do you like, what combinations do you like. Do you like more bold colors? Do you like greens or blues? Do you like more natural colors or maybe more of a purple? Just for example. What's great about this website too is that all these examples show how they work on actual website, what the colors are named, and then these hex codes. So if you're not familiar, a hex code is a 6-digit alphanumeric code that represents any or all colors. So as you can see, each of these colors have different combinations. And if you then paste these 6-digit codes into a program like Photoshop or other graphic design programs, any illustrator, graphic designer can grab those exact same shades or hues to make sure you're using the same colors exactly throughout all of your websites, your materials, any other thing you're going to do that use your corporate colors. So for starters, this is a great approach to just get those gears turning. Maybe you land on a color palette you really love actually by going through a couple different web results, but if not, it can start helping you get down the right path. So that said, let's keep going here and go one level deeper. Let's say, for example, you go through some example website color palettes using tools like Canva or other Google results, and let's say you found something that's kind of close, but you really want to fine tune it. Just for an example, why don't we take this color palette here with the two blues, the gold leaf, and the ivory black as well. And let's go to another website and see how can we customize this a little further. So as the next step, in my web browser, I went over to one of my favorite websites when it comes to creating color palettes, which is coolors.co. And I'll put the URL in the video here as well. Basically, this is a really fun website for generating color palettes. What happens is it gives you a combination of 5 different colors, and all you do then is just click the space bar, and every time you do so, it'll start generating new color palettes for you. And at any time, you can move these around left to right. You can lock in colors by hitting this little lock icon, but you also can tweak at a custom level any specific shade, or if you'd like, you can also type in your own hex codes as well. So what I want to do is let's go back to that example and pre-fill some of those shades of blue. All right, so through the magic of video, we just fast forwarded through putting in those custom colors. These were the 4 shades that we saw and liked from that prior example. Now, what do we do with these? Now, let's say, for example, we really like both those shades of blue. We like this indigo dye, we like this blue NCS. And granted, the label of these colors is a little different from what they were called in the prior example, but the hex code and therefore the color is the same, and that's what matters. So let's say, for example, we like these both. Let's lock these both in. And let's say this seems like a really good supplemental color, maybe be good for the font, but it's a little bit too light. So let's just play around and say, okay, we like this shade. This is a little better near black. Let's go with this one and lock it in. But let's say we don't really like this gold color. So what's cool is that now on coolers, we've got these blues locked in. We've got this black locked in. All we do now is just hit the space bar until we land on something we really like. Well, personally, that's not too bad. I like that. I know I tend to move towards blues and grays a lot, so let's just see if there's some other supplemental colors that look really good. And granted, this is going to depend a lot on your brand, what you're trying to convey. Some cases, more of a prettier, more of a pastel palette might make sense. Sometimes more of a bold and funky color might be good. So I'm going to arbitrarily just pick one too, and this could depend, as mentioned, a lot on the brand we're going for. But let's say we love this lavender gray. So basically now we've got a really good color palette. We've got a dark blue, this indigo dye that we're going to call as our primary color. We've got this lighter blue and the lavender gray we can use as supplemental colors. And then there's this rich black that we can use for a text as well. But let's say we want one more color, and we want to be a really subtle, not white, background color. How can we figure that out? Well, let's go to one more website where we can change these shades a little bit. Okay, so I've moved over now to a new website in my browser. This is another fun, easy to use website called copypalette.app. And basically what this web page allows you to do is type in any hex code, and then you can see different shades of that color, lighter and darker. So it's really easy and a good tool if you want more of a monochromatic scheme, for example, where maybe you find a shade of blue or a shade of red or a shade of green you really like and want different variants of that, lighter or darker. This tool alone can be a really helpful tool for finding a color palette if you want colors of the same shade, like you want all reds, all purples, things like that, but also can help with some supplemental colors too. So for this example, let's go here and change the base color over to that blue that we liked from our prior screen. And the hex code is 083C5D. So let's type that in. And we can see in the middle here, we've got that shade of blue, and then lighter variants and darker variants. We can also move the contrast back and forth to make that variation more subtle or more intense. And we also can have more variations as well. So for this example, initially why we came over here is I was throwing out the thought of, well, we like that indigo dye, that main blue color, but let's try to find a more subtle variation of that we can use for the background. So what we've got so far is we've got some different iterations of this blue. Some of these aren't quite light enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this color here, this lightest shade of blue. This is kind of the same family. I'm going to put that in actually as the hex color. And hopefully what that'll do is help move the color palette towards the lighter side of things. So still getting lighter here. This is EEF7FE. This is really hard to see, and that's because it's so close to white. But that's actually what we want for a background, or at least let's say that's what we want in this example. Something that's really close to white, but not quite. Granted, if you use this color and put it as a background, having a whole screen with this really light shade of blue might look more intense than the way it looks as a small box. But just for an example, this is the approach you can take if you're looking for similar shades. This blue will work really well with that original indigo dye color we had found. So just to double check things, I hopped back over to that website we were just looking at, coolers.co, and I tossed in all the individual shades and colors that we'd selected so far. So here we've got again that indigo dye, that dark blue, the lighter blue. This was the lavender gray. Here's that dark font color we picked, and here's that really, really subtle light blue that we just found on copypalette.app. And overall, granted, of course, the color palette is going to depend a lot on what our business actually is, what emotions or connotations we want to evoke with our color palette. But just at the surface level, this ended up being a really nice color palette. It works really well. We've got a good primary color. These light blue and the lavender gray can work really well as supplemental colors. This Alice blue is really nice as a background option, or it can be used as a supplemental background if you want to go back and forth of some sections of the home page are white, for example. Then to add some contrast, the next section below that has this Alice blue background. And then we also have this really nice, slightly off black color we can use for fonts or other dark highlights as well. So overall, this was a really efficient process. We took a few minutes. We started off getting some design inspiration from Canva or other websites. We hopped into coolers.co to kind of play around a little bit. We refined some of the colors using copypalette.app, and now I've got a pretty good color combination. So granted, for your website, for your own brand, you're probably going to spend a little more thought, a little more time thinking about who you want to be, generally what colors can help evoke those emotions, what fit with the brand. But these are really simple tools to help really efficiently land on good color combinations that work really well together. That said, though, I want to share just a couple other tools really quickly if you want to start more from scratch and just go a little deeper into creating custom color palettes for your business. The first other website I want to share is materialui.co/colors. And this is a nice website if you just want to get a broad look at different colors. It's kind of like opening up the big box of crayons and just seeing what all is in there. So for me, it helps get a sense of, are there any oranges I like or blues, or just generally what shades might work really well as starting points. So for any of these, you can hover over them, grab the color, and it'll copy to your clipboard. Then you can paste it into Photoshop or any other of these other apps we've used online as well. Next up is Paladin.com. This one really gets into the weeds a little more artistic theory, I guess you'd say. But really what you can do on this website is you've got this color wheel on the left, and as you move the cursor around, you can see on the right it changes these different color palettes. Right now we've got it set to be a monochromatic color palette, which basically means different shades or different hues of the same base color. Pardon me, I might be a little bit off on my terminology here, not being an art major, but you can kind of get the gist of how it works. You can also then switch to other combinations such as adjacent colors, triad colors, and see how those look. This is just a neat way to see different color combinations and different degrees of lightness or darkness for these different shades, and see if any of these might be a good fit for your website or your color palette. So to summarize, these are a couple free tools online that are pretty cool, pretty easy to use to help you find a really good color palette for your company, for your brand, and for your website. And these are things that we can get kind of nerdy about at Buddy, but they're really neat and exciting for us, something we use a lot to help create really great looking materials and websites for our clients. And granted, it's a little bit of art, a little bit of science, and that's why sometimes it helps to bring in professionals just to make sure things are looking really, really nice. If we can be a resource for you here at Buddy, we're more than happy to chat and see how we could be a fit. No pressure, no obligation. If you'd like to learn more about our team, of course, you can visit our website at www.buddywdd.com. And if you'd like to start a conversation, you can just click on that button in the upper right-hand corner, answer a few quick questions, and we'll follow up right away to schedule some time to chat. So as always, hope this has been helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll talk to you again real soon.